Hi there, and welcome to Sask Music's Indigenous History Month interview series. My name is LJ Tyson. I'll be your host, and I'm joined today by Falynn Baptiste. Good morning, Falynn. How are you?
Good morning. I'm really great.
Thank you so much for taking the time to let me interview you today. I would like to pick your brain on so much, but we'll keep it short because I know you're a very busy person, so I don't want to waste too much of your time here. But once again, I just appreciate you taking the time to do this. So you do a lot of music in our language, in the Cree language. And I guess just first things first, I want to ask why that's important to you personally.
I was very blessed. I was very fortunate to have grown up with immersed in the language and the culture and the ceremony and the customs and the Cree law through my parents. My dad is from Red Pheasant First Nation, and my mom is from Cumberland House, Saskatchewan, so a Metis community, but she had moved down to Red Pheasant when she was quite young. And so I was surrounded by first language Cree speakers. And like I said, consider myself extremely blessed, not realizing how fortunate I was until later on in life, and realizing, wow, what a privilege to have that transmission of knowledge and language, and that unbroken transmission. Um, when we consider all of the factors that colonialism and the impacts that it's had on our people. I consider myself really blessed. And so moving forward as a musician, as a teacher, the language has become paramount in terms of what it is I want to stand for and what it is I want to impart on others.
And where does your love of music come from? Is that something you got from your family as well?
Yes, my kakam, I remember, well, my nugam fan, because she's passed on. I remember her singing in the kitchen all the time. She'd be singing maybe a round dance song, or she'd be singing a power song, but she'd also be singing country music. And my dad was a musician in the 70s. And so being raised again by that aspect of music, and I guess being given the ability to sing, from the creator myself, music was just a natural avenue for me. And I started singing at a very young age. I think my first performance was when I was in grade one. And I've been performing ever since.
What is your original music like? For those that don't know, what kind of original music do you put out there in the world?
I suppose as an artist, I'm evolving. The album that I released, my first solo album last year, was um, a folk album. I naturally gravitate towards country music because I grew up with country music. However, having an eclectic background myself, as the music venture moved forward, the sound that came through wasn't as much country as it was more just a singer-songwriter folk-based sound. And I think as I evolve as an independent artist, we all grow, we all change. And so it'll be interesting to see where my music goes in the future. And so.
What's the process like translating a song from English um, into Cree? Is it a difficult thing, or is it something that comes natural to you?
Cree is a very descriptive language. It's a very complex language. The connotations and the usage is really important. And what people don't realize is you can translate an English song or English lyrics into Cree, but then when it's retranslated back into English from being Cree, it almost tells a different story. It's almost a poetic sonnet that's very different from its original form and just carries more meaning. And so it's actually a beautiful process. Where it gets tricky is trying to fit the syllabic formation of a Cree word into for example, the bars of music. When you think about a word like, not that you'd put the word school in a song, but school is giskana matugamik. That's school. It's the place where you go and learn. So try singing that in a melodic way. It becomes really complex. So as you write the music and you fit it to, the actual music itself, you have to make alterations to the word. For example, instead of saying maybe I'd say I want to remember. Ewi Giskisian is I remember, but maybe when I sing it, I'll take out the or I'll just say Giskisian in order to have it flow and the cadence to be still an attractive sound. So I make alterations to the word when I sing it, but when it's printed into lyrical form, I keep the integrity of the language by keeping its original, how would you say it? Its original, it's called SRO, Standard Roman Orthography. So taking the Cree language and writing it into words using the English lettering system. Does that make sense? So yes, it's very complex.
It is,
but yeah.
So writing and recording your music, it's like celebrating and preserving the language in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a, I think it's such an important thing, honestly. Like it's work that not a lot of people are doing. Do you find that?
I do, but I haven't done a lot of research. I don't want to say that I'm the first, because the availability of Cree language resources in any form is so limited in terms of its access, because it's not a part of mainstream, right? We're not occupying those spaces that make it readily available, like Amazon or Indigo or anything like that. So they're out there. Maybe things, for example, are no longer being published, they're no longer in print, they're no longer being manufactured, just from the supply and demand. However, who's dictating the supply and the demand, right? We're just kind of joining those spaces of having, buying things online and, having Wi-Fi. There was a time we only had dial-up and maybe one phone down the street, so we're a little late in the game. And so we're beginning to occupy the spaces, but the readily availability of Cree language, anything, it's really difficult. Even, for example, to find a cartoon or a show or something where the language is being spoken. Well, there's APTN. Well, if you don't have APTN, well, then you have to subscribe. Well, if you can't subscribe, you know what I mean? There's just a lot of barriers to us having access to our language. So I can't, yes, I believe there are tons and tons of resources out there, but they're not readily available.
There's so many of our people that are just discovering their roots. They're just discovering who they are. And I think often there can be this shame that comes along with when you're surrounded by people who know the language and you don't, you know what I mean? Because of whatever reason, you just don't know your own language. What words of encouragement or advice do you have for those, that maybe are feeling very disconnected from their language, or they do feel that shame that they can't speak the language? Like, where do they even get started? I know that's a loaded question. Sorry.
I remember because I got lost too in life. I was trying so hard to fit into the Western world. And so after leaving my First Nation, I went to school on my First Nation until I was in grade 7. And then we had to move off the reserve to go to high school. And so I chose North Battleford. And that was kind of my first abrupt experience with racism and realizing what this represented. And so at the age of 13, I already decided that who I was not what was embraced or appreciated. So I started to change who I was to fit in. And that continued on even into becoming a teacher. When I occupy spaces as a First Nation woman, there was already a stigma, towards me. And so I felt I had to work that much harder. So in that process of finding acceptance, I abandoned a lot of who I was, including my language, for a brief period of time. So I had to come back in my healing journey full circle. And that's when I went back to the University of Saskatchewan to get my certificate in Indigenous languages with Dr. Kevin Lewis. And that reconnected me to my language. And I remember at that beginning point of reorienting myself to uncovering the identity that I had hidden for so long, I sat with my dad and I said, Dad, I don't think I can do it. And he said, Kagaskitan, you can do it. The language lives in your blood. It's part of your blood memory. It's part of your DNA. You just have to pray on it. You just have to believe in it and get that the way. Eventually it'll come, and I think about my journey from when I went back to school in 2016 to now, I would have never, if you asked me when I was 20, if I would be working in this capacity and singing music in this capacity, I'd say, what, are you crazy? So my advice would be agamemo. That's a word that we're often told by the old people is never, never, never give up, Gagape, kayam yan. So to always pray. Ayam yak is us to pray and to believe in that spirit, because our language is a spirit and our language is power, and to keep those good intentions and to keep that good energy and to send it out there. And like my dad said to me, get that away. It'll come. It'll just come. It'll show up. And to embrace one another and to live by our laws of like sagitwin, to love one another. And when you love one another, you can create an accepting, safe space for us to connect. And there is a lot of shame. I remember selling my CDs at a Christmas market. And this man came up who must have been my dad's age. And I started speaking Cree to him, and he started getting really uncomfortable. And I was kind of reading his vibe, and I thought, oh, did I say something wrong? And I kept pressing him to try to create conversation. And he was so embarrassed. He must have been maybe 65. He was embarrassed to look me in the eye and say, I don't actually know my language. And then he walked away. And I felt so bad, So to remove the stigmas ourselves, that many of us are in the same space of not knowing and that we're trying to know. And so that embracing and that love is really important.
Your music seems to come from such a pure, honest place. And and thank you for that. I mean, like I said previously, like it's such important work, and I'd like to see it become more universal. Where do you see your music heading in, let's say, 5 years? Where would you like to see yourself?
I suppose reaching a larger platform. I haven't really had the opportunity to branch out, across provinces. I've kind of just stayed local, because I have my teaching career that's really important. I work with Indigenous youth here in the city of Saskatchewan. And so to abandon them to pursue music, just doesn't feel right, because I feel like I have purpose and meaning to be a part of their lives. They're like my kids, so I can just leave my kids, So when opportunity presents itself, I'd like to put out another album, maybe have more resources for people to understand the language, whether it be language tutorials, providing maybe a lesson on how to read Cree, because reading Cree and speaking Cree and hearing Cree, there are different types of fluency. Some people can understand the language but can't read it. Some people can read it but can't speak it. So to maybe just bring more awareness to the learning journey. Just want to just never give up and, not do it to be heard, but do it to be a part of those champions who've kept the language alive.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know you're busy, and I really appreciate the time to be interviewed. So just a big thank you from me on behalf of Sask Music. Thank you.
Okay, Thank you so much.